Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Hybrid Healing Hour. Today we're going to be discussing enhancing longevity. And this is a big topic these days, I think, with the books out by Peter Attia and a lot of other biohackers. And we have friends and colleagues here with us today to discuss the nitty gritty. So welcome, please, Emily Barron-Oilar and Ryan Oilar. Thank you for coming on. Will you please introduce yourselves to our audience and tell them a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, would love to. Well, thanks for having us. We appreciate being here so much. I am Emily Barron-Oilar, and I have been in the world of diagnostics since about 2006. And about 7 years ago, my husband and I saw a need for a center that was very patient-centric and more on the functional side, as well as kind of almost like a hybrid of, Eastern and Western medicine. So we started our health center, which is Nouveau Health and Wellness, and I'm also a life and wellness coach. So that's just kind of a quick little history of me and where I come from in all of this.
And I'm Ryan Oilar, and like Emily said, we created the business, and a lot of it just stems from people wanting to really be advocates for their own health, and with how a lot of the healthcare systems are kind of changing and the dynamics and stuff like that, with people being able to spend time with you, so that's kind of where we created it, so that we could focus on not just treating the illness, but actually hey, why is this happening? What's going on? And really encouraging patients to be their own advocate for their own health and giving them information.
Right. And, I think that's why we like working with you. It's also you are very one-on-one with your patient interaction.
Yeah, you have to be.
Yeah.
We love collaborating with people, and you guys have been great for us to collaborate with over the past few years. And we've been to your clinic, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it's one of the nicest offices I've seen in a while.
It feels like home. It really does.
Well, thanks. Yeah, we appreciate that. We worked really hard to make sure that that's what you felt like. When you walked in, you didn't feel like you were going into a medical office. That you felt like, okay, hey, I'm going to go visit my friend's house or something that just so happens to be a clinician.
And Nouveau's won some awards, has it not?
We have. We've won Best of Palm Beach County the last 5 years in a row for best, wellness spa, and we are really proud of that. And I think a lot of it does have to do with the fact that we really practice what we preach there. Everything is very personalized and individualized, and understanding that no two of us are alike in terms of our genetics and our DNA and all of these things. Obviously, when we're looking at trying to understand and practice root cause medicine, it really makes a big difference in kind of looking at each person as a true individual. And I think that kind of lends itself a lot to what we're going to talk about today.
So saying that, let's jump into the topic. So we don't like to use the term anti-aging, as we're all going to age, right? That's inevitable. We're not going to stop that process. We prefer to use the term enhancing longevity. And we also need to refocus our attention from lifespan to health span.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that, I almost like to talk about, we talk about the practice of medicine. I almost like to talk about the practice of wellness, right?
Absolutely.
Trying to really understand and get our heads around what that really looks like. And I think it's as complex, but also as simple as we want to make it. There are so many components, right, to looking at longevity. And when we talk about, the concept of biological age versus chronological age, but really, when it comes down to it, we can be our own advocates, and there's a lot of things that we can do, with our healthcare providers, but also on our own to
Absolutely.
really enhance our longevity. It's not just about, living as long as we can, but also the quality and making sure we're doing all of the things to optimize our bodies.
I always give so with health span, right? The example is it's about the quality of life, like you just said, living disease-free, quality You're not walking around in pain and aching for a majority of your life. Like, we're all going to hit, 85, hopefully,
Hopefully,
90,
yeah.
right? We're all going to age, like you said. But like you said, it's how we age and the quality of aging. And I always give the example, I've seen pictures of this, with two 80-year-old women, one side by side. One woman is sitting by the window with her walker and looking outside the window, wishing she was out there able to walk. And the other one is in the gym raising her biceps. And you can see, she just is thriving. So, pick your path, and it's what you do at an earlier age which influences your future. And people don't realize that. So just because you're young and you might not be gaining weight when you eat McDonald's every day doesn't mean you're doing the right thing for your body. A lot of people think about like the aesthetics and how you look on the outside, but we are really passionate about how you feel on the inside and how we age.
Absolutely. And I think, to your point, bringing up aesthetics, a lot of what you do internally is going to show itself externally, right?
Absolutely.
And, we like to talk a lot about, and obviously today we're talking about longevity. Well, one of the most important things is our gut health. And, I think, as a society, we're kind of starting to hear a lot more about that, but really understanding, what does that look like? What does that mean? And what can we do about our gut health? Why is it important? How is it interconnected with how we feel mentally and emotionally? And I think those are some things that we can kind of dive into today and talk about.
Yeah, and some just like popped in my head when you're talking about like aesthetics and like the internal coming out and stuff like that. One of the things, and I know we're gonna probably get into this a little bit later, but one of the things that was really cool is when we first implemented NAD IVs.
Yeah, NAD.
NAD.
Right?
Yeah, when we implemented that in our practice and we're starting to utilize that, like I did a load, so we were doing multiple infusions in a row, did like 3 or 4 in a row, then a maintenance every other week. One of the things that was really interesting is the wrinkles in my forehead and around my eyes, my crow's feet, they started to subside. And it was almost like I had like a Botox or Dysport, whatever kind of like aesthetic treatment, but it didn't. It wasn't that. It was my body and the cells regenerating and healing from the inside out.
I guess I'll be starting that tomorrow.
Yeah, it's
I'll
pretty
be
crazy.
starting that right away.
Yeah, it is. It is amazing though, like how you do see so much that translate into like how you look and feel about yourself from getting healthy on the inside. And I think, talking about the gut, right? We know inflammation is now key in the world of understanding longevity and enhancing longevity, as you guys like to call it. And I think that's a great way to put it.
We actually say inflammaging because we know that the chronic inflammation is what causes aging.
That's right. That's right. And so what are some simple things we can do, right, to kind of, focus on our gut health? There are things that we can do. We can do, gut resets, and we can do all kinds of detoxes, but there are really like simple things that we can do to kind of start that process. And everybody's journey looks a little different, I think, with, kind of gut health and healing the gut. But I think like eating, foods that are not pro-inflammatory and trying to understand, well, what does that mean? Like, they talk about like, oh, this is GMO and this is processed and then, but what does that really mean? Like in the most simple terms, and this might sound really oversimplified, but shopping on the outside aisles of the grocery store, if you don't know where to begin and you're just new to this journey and you're just trying to get healthy and you're trying to feel better, that's a great place to start, right? Because eating whole foods, we know that is anti-inflammatory. We know that our fruits and our vegetables and things of that nature, if you're going to eat grains, eat whole grains, eat sprouted grains, things like that. And shopping those areas where you're not buying the processed foods, because those are all pro-inflammatory. That's something that's obviously going to kind of jumpstart the process. Drinking a lot of water. That's another one that is so underrated, but we forget to do those sorts of things. So there are simple things that we can do that aren't quite as, intricate, but we can also obviously go to, places like you guys or us where, you can actually seek help and, be held accountable but in a way that's attainable and achievable and it doesn't feel scary.
Absolutely. I mean, people don't understand how the processed diet are such endocrine disruptors, and they're affecting our hormones, and all of this affects your metabolism and the inside, like we already said, inflammation. So the one thing I really want to talk about and educate our audience about is the difference between the biological age from the chronological age. Can you talk on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, like when we think about biological versus chronological age, it's important to understand the distinction. And it's important to understand that from a biological, standpoint, it's about what we're doing, and it's about how we're taking care of our body. Obviously, our chronological age is the number of years we've been on this planet, right? And so,
and I've always said age is just a number, and this is exactly why, because you can have your date of birth and your actual chronological age, but if you don't feel that way and your body isn't physiologically acting that way,
that's like when you wake up and you're 45 and you wake up and you crawl out of bed and you're craking and your back's popping and you just feel horrible.
Right.
You feel, and you're like, oh man, I feel like I'm 80 or whatever. I mean, that is the biological, chronological.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I had a 67-year-old this morning. Actually, I was just talking to him about pretty much everything we're going to discuss today. And, he's in the gym pumping like heavy weights. He looks great, but, he still is just like, I don't just feel optimal though. I mean, yeah, I can beat the kids I'm with and whatever. But I was like, well, we talked about diet. And I said, why don't you try avoiding refined grains? Like essentially everything white, right? Like bleached flour, bleached wheat, whatever, right? And so he's like, oh, I do eat a lot of pasta. And I was like, look, carbs are good to build muscle. You need carbs, but let's choose the right carbs. And we talked about that. He's like, now that you say that, he's like, I know for a fact when I don't eat sugar, I wake up and I'm in no pain. He's like, I feel great. And I was like, well, let's just start with that.
And it does. I mean, sugar is a huge contributor to inflammation, right? Mm-hmm. We know that. And it's actually one of those things that like I personally try to stay away from, because I can tell like when I eat something that has too much sugar in it, like you get that spike and then you get that crash. And that is it's the worst feeling. So that makes a lot of sense. But I think that biological age, Deanna, it's a lot more predictive nowadays for the onset of disease and overall mortality versus chronological age. It's like you can have a person that's 50 and you can have a person that's 80, and the 80-year-old can be a lot healthier, than the 50-year-old. And
absolutely.
Why? Because you're looking at it from a biological standpoint, not a chronological standpoint.
And the medical community as a whole has not embraced that. Worldwide, chronological age is probably increasing, whereas biologic age is probably decreasing. Mm-hmm. And until we start measuring and reporting on the statistics of biologic age, which is probably harder to measure, I don't think things are going to get significantly better unless people start going to places like your clinic where you actually try to do something about it.
And I think a lot of it's about prevention, right? Like it's, to your point, it's not waiting until you're sick and needing sick care. Mm-hmm. It's doing things ahead of time and actually obtaining true health care for your body. And there's just so many different things that we can do nowadays. One of the things that we like to talk about a lot at our center, and it's so easy, it's so simple, there's no side effects, red light therapy.
Absolutely.
That's one of those things. Talk about an easy, an easy modality that, it's not painful, it's not overly expensive. But basically red light therapy is working on the cellular level. And we know now, obviously in the functional space, that cellular health ultimately is what it's all about. It's where the inflammation starts, right? So if we're able to get in that red light therapy bed once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, even better, right? We're able to work on the cellular level, on the mitochondria of the cell to increase ATP and to increase cellular turnover. And then what does that mean? We're getting rid of those cells that aren't healthy anymore. We're getting rid of them, and we're helping to promote and build the new healthy cells.
Essentially, it allows your body to function properly because
Correct.
it's not as bogged down.
Right.
And people don't understand, like, the mitochondria within each and every single cell in our body is the powerhouse. I mean, this is what, like you said, in ATP, think when we say the word ATP, we're talking about energy.
Yes.
Not only cellular energy, but this gives your body the energy and the functionality of every cell to work properly.
Absolutely. And that, that contributes to obviously better sleep patterns, less anxiety, less pain. Red light, we know, is extremely helpful for pain and recovery. For those athletes out there, it's incredible. I can't tell you how many athletes come to the center, obviously, to have better workouts and to perform better. But I think most importantly, just that overall, like, immune response is just going to be so much better because you're obviously you're oxygenating your cells faster, you're turning them over faster. So the benefits of red light therapy are just tremendous, and we're learning more every single day. They're doing a ton of research, obviously, at some of the largest teaching institutions in the country with the Nouveau bed, actually, specifically.
Well, and that brings up a really good point, I think. Like, obviously, like, there's peer-reviewed evidence that shows that, photobiomodulation or the red light therapy, that, it's beneficial. St. Jude, they use
With the cancer patients.
Yeah, they
and the
utilize
children.
it with the children.
Absolutely.
Harvard Med, like Mayo Clinic, all these things. But you got to make sure that whatever you're looking at for your red light device is an actual, benefit device. It's not just a red light. So that's one of the things I think it is important where, like, there are different cars that are out there, but clearly some cars are more sport performance than others. And even though they're both cars. So you want to make sure that, you do your research before you're going to go into a center or, ask what type of red light, because the studies that are out there are using top grade, not just some that you can buy on, like, online.
Right. Absolutely. No, I'm glad you touched on that too, because not all red lights are created equal, right?
That's right.
And infrared is something you don't see, but it's often put in with the red. But so it's, somebody could probably advertise that they have infrared and they don't, right? But I know we just got a red light device in our office and I love it. I've been using it, and I've actually just been using it for skin on my back personally, and I have seen remarkable difference. I'm going to start using it on my face because I know, like, they were talking about how it's good for wrinkles and anti-aging of the skin and all that too. And I think it's phenomenal. In fact, I notice when I use it right before bed, I sleep so good, and I highly recommend it for people out there. I just go right to sleep. I love it.
Yeah.
You have to research. You have to research the wavelength of the lights because they're, like you said, they're not all the same. And lots of people have machines, but doesn't mean that all machines
The
are
millimeters of depth,
Yeah.
right? To get to the tissues, to be able to penetrate the tissues is what really makes a difference.
Yeah, the near and the far.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So when we talk about inflammation, many people are going to do their own research and look up things, and you're going to read about things such as cytokines and free radicals and oxidative stress and free radical species. And these are all complicated topics, but they all boil down to these are reactions that happen in the body, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, these are things that, just by virtue of being a human, right, we're all going to experience this. We're all going to have free radicals. We're all going to have oxidative stress. But there are things that we can do to try to combat, and that's kind of where it ties back to all the different things that we can do. I mean, obviously, your free radicals are circulating in your body, and the reality is under, on a regular basis, like, they're not accumulating in excess. But if you are not well and you're not taking care of yourself and you're overly inflamed on the cellular level, then you're going to have a hard time getting rid of the free radicals. And so that's kind of where everything is so interconnected. Our bodies are kind of like a spider web, right? And if we are not doing, all of the things, then we're obviously going to be much more prone to disease, whether it be heart disease, cancer, like all of these things, autoimmune. I mean, that's a really big one. And again, it all ties back to cellular health and making sure that your cells are healthy. what happens is if the cells are not healthy, like we have like trillions of cells in our body, right? And if those cells are inflamed, they are not able to accept, like the receptors are not able to accept the things that they need. They're not able to take in the nutrients. They're not able to, appropriately take in thyroid and hormones and all of the things that they need to be healthy. So it's really, really, really important to make sure our bucket is not overflowing. I know I can't remember if it's I don't remember if it's Dr. Pompa or Dr. Hyman. One of the big functional docs that talks a lot and does a lot of podcasts talks a lot about your bucket overflowing, and that's that leads into the whole cellular health and making sure that our cells are not inflamed. So yeah, I mean Dr. Marias is spot on when he's talking about the free radicals and the oxidative stress and all of these things happen to us if we're not, if we're overly inflamed.
Well, something so simple as, once again, going back to the diet, getting enough antioxidants can help counteract all those free radicals. And the oxidative stress is when you have so much reactive free radicals in the body that aren't being taken care of, right? And you're not able to eliminate them or counteract them. So antioxidants like vitamin C and vitamin E, and then glutathione is a huge one. We've done a podcast on that. So if you haven't listened, go back and listen. You'll learn a lot about that. And as you guys do in your office, as well as us, is you put glutathione in IV drips. You probably have where you can take it orally or inject it and whatnot, because it's the master antioxidant and it can really help your body detox, get rid of free radicals, helps boost your immune system, all the above. And going into that, talking about the bucket, so that's going to lead right into the whole, your body not being able to detox properly either, right? And that has to do with methylation. So let's talk about how is methylation playing a role in aging?
Yeah, so I mean, for those of you, who don't understand process of adding methyl group to, one of the bases of your DNA, I think that it's important to understand that has a huge role in your mental health, like you said, your body detox, your hormone balance. And so I think that, that is another key component here of how we can sort of, I don't want to call it anti-age ourselves, right? But kind of increase that or enhance our longevity by making sure that process is in check. And there's things that you can do, obviously, with your clinician to make sure that you are appropriately methylating. There are markers that you can look at. One of them, obviously, being MTHFR. That's a big one. So just making sure that you're doing, again, all of the things to enhance your body's opportunity to be appropriately methylating.
So there's actually the way I like to look at methylation is the way it's gene expression. So the way it can turn your genes on or off, right? Just because you have the gene doesn't mean it's reactive or activated, right? And so you can control this a lot of times with just diet and exercise and proper lifestyle, right? And there's a great book out there called Dirty Genes by Dr. Ben Lynch. Love it. I mean, he goes into it, and it's very redundant, but it's like, it clicks. After you read the same thing over and over, it finally lets you realize how, wow, there's certain things that are controllable. Like, even though there's epigenetics and there's genetics, and the epigenetics is something you can actually turn on or off, and that's like, if you smoke, you could be creating that, turning on that cancer gene in your body.
Absolutely.
If you don't smoke, that cancer gene you may have that cancer gene, but it might not actually get turned on. And that's what people don't understand. And so that's where the methylation, I think, is really important for people to understand their genes. And if you can go to a provider that can check those genes, and that helps prevention, like we're talking about. I am on a supplement because I'm a dual heterozygous MTHFR, and yes, and a CompT and an ApoE, and I'm all these things, right? I'm like, I definitely have dirty genes here.
Yeah.
But I am doing everything in my willpower to have healthy diet, healthy lifestyle, and I'm taking the proper supplements to hopefully prevent from ever turning on those genes. Sure. And that's where other people out there should be aware of what they have.
Well,
absolutely.
And that's one of the things actually that we offer at our clinic is, unfortunately, because of some of the landscapes of insurance and things like that, commercial doesn't cover it.
Right.
But on the Medicare side or Medicare Advantage plans, like they do, and it's an inflammation gene test.
That's
and
awesome.
It's about 80 plus genes, and it'll tell you if you're homozygous, heterozygous, and all of these genes are, okay, hey, you have these genes, you're predisposed, and to have these genes turn on if they're not, things like that. And so it's neat because, like what you said, like if you don't know, then how are you going to treat it? And so then from the clinical side, then you say, okay, hey, like you're predisposed to this. So, hey, let's put you on this. Let's put you on this regimen. Let's get you in these modalities, whatever, so that way we prevent those things from happening.
Exactly. And you guys have a few different devices or what you call it at your clinic that help with detox, right? Because I don't think people understand the importance of detox. And I mean, we've done an environmental podcast, which I've had some people tell me I can't even listen to it because we're all going to die. But I would recommend you go back and take a listen to it because you can learn a lot from that environmental toxin podcast we did, because we talk as well about how your body has to be able to detox. And if it doesn't, there's the danger. So what can they do in your clinic to help with detoxing?
Yeah. So like one of the ones that we use a lot is we have an ozone pod. And basically it gets about 107 degrees in there. It's steam, and we pump ozone in there. And you're sitting in this. And
what is ozone, if you don't mind me asking?
So basically the way that it works is we have an ozone generator. So it takes the air that you're just breathing, pumps it into an oxygen concentrator. The oxygen concentrator then puts it in this little box. It electrocutes the oxygen atom. So you have some O2s, some O1s. The O1 jumps a hold of the O2, so now you have O3. It's a very unstable molecule, and then there's a chemical reaction that takes place with the steam while it's in the pod, and your head's poking out because ozone is harmful for your respiratory system, your eyes, things like that. And then it goes inside your body, you absorb it, and because that extra oxygen molecule is unstable, it pops off, and then you have some O2s and an O1, and then your cells gobble up that extra O1. Essentially.
So it sounds like it kind of causes your body to do a little what we call hormesis, which is like some of that minor stress mechanism that kind of like what fasting does, and a little bit of healthy exercise is causing the stress to the body, but it generates wellness.
Yeah, it does. And it's estimated anywhere from like 400 to 600 calories is actually what you're burning during a 20-minute or so ozone session, and not an ozone pod, because of what you just discussed.
You definitely want to go in there hydrated.
Yes, it sounds like it.
Yeah, and it's really neat. You even see when you get out of the ozone sauna, you see the heavy metals that your body has excreted. You're sitting on a towel when you're in there, and you literally see the metals that have, it sounds a little disgusting, but it's
I love
satisfying,
that kind of stuff.
right? Because, it's really satisfying because you recognize, okay, if you're not a believer in all things functional, right? Like if you're not a believer, you see it and you can't dispute it, right? It's there.
Yeah, that it's just pouring out of your sweat.
It is.
Essentially, yeah.
It is.
It's like some of it's most likely like a grayish brownish type, like
discharge.
I guess you can call it. That
Yeah.
you're sitting there around your thigh area, and you can do things like, okay, go have some tuna or sushi or something like that, a couple days ahead of time, come in there and you'll see a marked difference. So you can actually see it.
Okay, so I'm coming to do that as well because I did a heavy metal cleanse and I still have a little bit in me, and I just try to avoid eating fish now because I just don't want to get my mercury levels or aluminum back up. So that's so awesome. Wow, and it's different than a sauna, right? I go to the sauna at the gym, the dry sauna, where you're just in the the wood and it smells good and you're sweating. So that's also very good detox, and I know there's a lot of recommendations out there for doing this, 2 to 3 times a week. And, but this causes, it sounds like a different type of cleanse, and it's more than just sweating. It's causing your body to have a reaction that is able to detox a lot better.
Yeah. And you can actually because we titrate you up.
On the
session.
time.
Yeah. The time as well as the amount of ozone that you pump in there, because you do have like a detox shock.
Sure.
Which is obviously bad. So so it's neat. So where you can actually start and increase to really detoxify your system.
Oh.
Now, do you mind if I ask what is your opinion on like the ozone IV? Is that something that you guys do?
We currently don't. We don't do the major autohemotherapy to date. It's controversial, right? It's very beneficial, but there's also it's dangerous. So we feel that patients are able to kind of obtain the same results with the ozone sauna and not doing the major autohemo. So we have opted at this point not to do that. Does that mean in the future we won't? No. It's just we like to feel really, really comfortable. And we spend a lot of time at Nouveau vetting the things that we bring into the practice to make sure, obviously, that they work. But the number one thing, obviously, is that they're safe.
Absolutely. And like you said, if you can get the same results with not the IV, which is a little more risky, then why not just stick with that?
Right. And certainly it's not painful, right? To get into the ozone
just
pod,
sit there and
you just
sweat.
kind of sit there and sweat versus having the, not everybody likes having, IVs and
Right. That is
maybe a
correct.
little needle focus.
Especially watching the blood, leave your body.
It's,
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've talked briefly about how genetics can influence longevity, and we know that genetic factors contribute to approximately 25% of the variation in our lifespan. So then the rest of it is lifestyle choices and environmental factors, So why don't we dive a little more into other lifestyle factors that I think we can control, things that we can do to prevent aging and inflammaging?
Absolutely. And I think so we've obviously touched a little bit on nutrition already today, talking about, making sure that we're making good food choices. But a lot of us don't really understand what that looks like. And the interesting part is for each and every one of our bodies, it's going to look different. So whereas some people may benefit, tremendously from, call it a keto diet, or maybe somebody else a paleo diet, or things of that nature, everyone is different. Right. And so we like to do, intermittent fasting is a big one. That's something that, has gained a lot of attention in the world of especially Eastern medicine in the last several years. And it's great because it does allow our bodies to do the things that it needs to do and kind of reset. But there are some people that aren't efficient at fat burning. And so they start eating into their muscle when they do those types of, intermittent fasts. So it really just depends on the person. So making sure that you really get your head around your own individualized nutrition, I think, is probably first and foremost, because we know that plays such a big role in our overall health. And you can do that by going to a center, obviously, like yours, like ours, or, you can do the research on your own too. But I think that nutrition is very intricate, and it is really important to understand your body and how your body works. And, looking at things like blood work and looking at things like genetics and things of that nature really help to discover what kind of nutritional lifestyle, I like to call it, is best for you. So I think that nutrition is, first and foremost, always. And making sure, like you said earlier on, eating a lot of antioxidants and things that are helpful anti-inflammatory foods to aid in, the gut health is first.
Well, and like you said, when you're shopping around the outside of the grocery store, like I tell, that's my very first tip to patients as well. I could not agree more, because that's where the whole foods are, right?
Absolutely.
That's where you're going to get your meat. That's your chicken or your fish department, right? And that's where, so you're not eating a packaged chicken breast that's been frozen and prepared with a bunch of like filler and stuff in it, right? And preservatives. Then you're going to, walk around, then you got your dairy section, you've got your vegetables. What you don't see are chips. You don't see that on the outside unless you're going off the end aisle stack, right? I mean, so that's what you don't realize. All the packaged food with all the crap in it is down the middle aisles. So avoid those.
Yeah.
Yes, you're going to find some good foods there, like olives, right? And olive oil is in the aisles, right? Okay, you can swing by and pick those up. But for the most part, that's where you want to get majority of your groceries, is on the outside.
I like to say the food is on the outside and the junk is on the inside.
Absolutely.
And I like to kind of really differentiate. I don't really believe that there's junk food. Junk is not food, and it's food is so medicinal for our bodies, and if we're eating the right way, it's a game changer. I mean, it's a game changer. I think a lot of us walking around in our country, namely, don't really even know what it's like to feel good anymore. And a lot of it ties back to what we're putting in our body. The you are what you eat it could not be more true, right?
Absolutely.
People should know what processed foods are and what ultra processed foods are.
Absolutely.
And those are the things that you need to stay away from.
I mean, I read the ingredients on everything I purchase. And guess what? An apple doesn't have an ingredient because it's just an apple, right? You know, like that's, so if there's a food that has more than 5 ingredients, I put it right back. If I even just pull it up, because my husband and I just went to Canada and, you know, it was, we were kind of comparing what was in the grocery store, and there's even just in that small little bit, they had healthier options, and we were reading labels and we were shocked, you know, like they didn't have high fructose corn syrup, and I was like, wow, amazing.
We also like the Yuka app.
Yes.
We'd like our patients to use that if they don't know what's good and what's not good.
Yeah, and that's
a great idea.
Yeah, because it's easy. Then they don't, because a lot of people they don't know what to do. Even, you know, I was talking about pasta with that patient this morning. I was like, if you get pasta, get it where it just says wheat durum.
Yeah.
Not a ton of other ingredients. The pasta should just be wheat durum. It shouldn't have all this other crap in it, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, or get it from Italy if you can, you know.
That's the thing, where everything, you know, here is just so modified and modified and modified. And
that's what GMO is, right?
Yes.
Genetically modified.
Right.
Right. So,
And the food tastes better.
it does.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, for those of us that they're like, hey, I just want to eat tasty food, when you're shopping around the outside and you're using whole ingredients and things like that, it tastes better. It tastes fresh. I mean, think of like a Greek salad as an example. I mean, it's refreshing. It tastes good.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I think we could stay on the nutrition topic for hours.
I know, you're right.
It's hard.
And we've already had several podcasts on nutrition as well, too.
And there's so much to talk about surrounding that. But I think, you know, another big one is obviously physical activity. And that may sound like, oh, well, duh, of course I need to exercise. But what does that really look like? And again, you know, everyone's different, right? But we do know that building muscle is key. It is key to staying healthy. It is key to staying strong. Your body is more efficient when you build muscle. Your metabolism works faster. So lifting heavy weights, even if you're older, you do what you can. That is important. Obviously, doing cardiovascular exercise, you know, for 30 to 45 minutes, as many times a week as you can, right? You want to take a day off, great, but making sure that you're getting your heart rate up and you're building muscle, making sure that you have regular physical activity in your life. It also helps with the chemicals in your body that we need to, you know, to stay strong and to stay healthy and to keep our inflammation down. That's another big one.
And it can prevent osteoporosis, which in the long run can prevent fractures or fracture risk, right? And if you are over the age of 65 and you get a fracture, that can completely change your life, and people don't realize that. So when you have muscle, I always tell people too, if they have joint pain, right, to build the muscle above and below the joint, because that helps stabilize that joint and it can help alleviate pain.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you have knee pain, a lot of times it's because your quads aren't or your hamstrings aren't strong enough.
Right.
So you got to strengthen that.
And we think it's important for people to actually measure their muscle and know what it is, whether it's with an in-body or a DEXA scan, or and I know you guys do that in your practice as well.
Yeah, we do. And, you know, I think along those lines, like the functional type movements too, that makes sense. Like, especially as you age, you know, like the standing up, the sitting down, like those types of things. So doing some squats and things like that, or, you know, bench assisted squats. You know, there was a commercial, and it was like during the holiday time, and there was like a grandpa, and he was working out, and it was all about him working out. But the point was he was working out and lifting so he could take his like probably 5-year-old grandchild and pick him up so they could put the star on top of the holiday. You know,
I saw
tree.
that. It was so heartfelt.
It
yes.
is, but that's a prime example of if you just do these functional movements and you do these things, they will, you know, they will enhance your longevity.
What people don't realize is I watch them get up out of the chair when we're done at the end of our visits, because I see, do they put their hands on the hand rest or arm rest to push up? And I say, oh, wait, stop. And they're like, what? I'm like, sit back down. Now do this. Do the I Dream of Jeannie, or put your hands across. I want to see you get up without using your arms.
I love that.
And if they can't, I said, now you practice this every day. And when you come back in here the next visit, you should be able to do that. And that's what I give them the goal, because they don't realize you use your arms to push you up. That means you're weak in your legs.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you're at more risk of falling.
We also think that grip strength should be a vital sign, and everyone should have their grip strength measured, just like their blood pressure, and also balance. There are testing devices now that measure balance really well. That's a sure sign of unhealthy aging.
And it's also linked with dementia and Alzheimer's if you cannot balance on one leg. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, and a lot of it also, I mean, quality of life, being able to go exercise depends if you get sleep, right?
That was my next one. Sleep is key. It's directly correlated to biological age. We know that cellular repair, hormonal health, your overall cognitive function, these are all directly correlated to sleep. I think sleep is maybe one of the most underrated factors that, has to do with longevity and overall, good biological aging.
I mean, I think a lot of us, I used to say this, I'll sleep when I die, right? Well, now I realize I don't want to die anytime soon. So guess what? I need to get my sleep now and to prevent me from dying early, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where people don't understand the importance of the role of circadian rhythm in being able to get your melatonin at night, to have proper cortisol levels. And in order to do those, I think you need to avoid caffeine, about 8 hours before you go your bedtime. There's so many things that affect the role of sleep.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to use the analogy of like a cell phone and a cell phone charger. For our bodies, it's our cell phone charger. We have to build back our battery at night, and if we don't, you feel it the next day. You don't, maybe you're a little more anxious. Maybe you're brain fog. I think a lot of times, you get a lot of brain fog when you don't get good sleep. So sleep is a big one, and we could go on. We could go on and on about sleep.
I think what's cool about that is like with today's technologies, whether it's like a Garmin watch or different rings or things like that, right? Like you can measure this, and you can measure like, okay, my REM cycle, like all these things, and you can get a score. Did you have a quality night's sleep? Or hey, you slept long enough, but it was poor sleep,
right?
And then being able to then if it's really an issue, being able to journal and find out, okay, hey, and what happened to me that day? How did I feel? Things like that.
Right, exactly. Like I love that the Oura Ring has little tags. I'm always tagging what I know about, like, and that way I can see my progress, right? And the other thing I'm going to just chime in and say what they have is they have your biological age on there too. And that is my competition. Now I'm competing with myself. I was like, oh, I got to increase that, right? It's saying I'm 5 years younger than I am. I was like, oh, I could totally do better. I'm trying to get to 10. Yeah. I was like,
you want to be 10 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, with sleep, the other thing that I just kind of want to mention, I think this is really important. A lot of people struggle with sleep. They struggle falling asleep. They struggle staying asleep. There are a lot of things that we can do nowadays in the world of functional medicine to help people sleep. Whether it be, sleep tinctures or supplements or red light therapy, or there are so many different things. So if you are having trouble sleeping, I think it's really important that you do seek help for that, because it's something that is fairly easily fixed. And in the world that we're living in with and I know the next topic is our stress management, but in the world that we're living in with all the stress, it is hard to shut our brains down sometimes. And we do find ourselves having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes I joke and I say, I make my best, decisions at 3 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep. But, all kidding aside, it's important to make sure you seek out some help if you're having trouble sleeping.
Yeah, and turn your phone off.
Absolutely.
I mean, like put it in sleep mode, put it aside, and you can even put like those, okay, I want everything, all the notifications silenced except for so-and-so, because obviously they're calling me in the middle of the night. It's important. Right. But yeah, I mean, in the world we live in where, it's almost like we're all conditioned for like this immediate access. Like, okay, hey, I want to know something. I look it up, Instagram, Facebook, I text someone, and email, whatever, and we're constantly doing those things.
Absolutely.
So let's go on to stress management.
It's a big one, right, guys? I think like this is a big one for everybody right now. I think we're living in stressful times. So I think stress is almost inevitable for most people in life. And I think that it can actually, stress, we know, can really accelerate aging through the activation of the inflammatory pathways. And I think that there's a lot of things that we can do for stress on our own. And if we're struggling with it, we can get help. But things like practicing, mindfulness, that's a big one. It's hard at first. But I think with practice, you get better at it. And, it's hard to shut your mind off nowadays, right? Because there's so many different things going on and there's constant stimuli around us, right? But there's an app that I love. I don't know if you guys have ever tried the Calm app.
Yes.
I love that app. I always tell, patients that that's something that is a really easy way to kind of just, even if you have 10 minutes, there's the Daily Calm on the Calm app. I should probably be doing a commercial for them right now, but it really is very, very helpful. It kind of takes you back to center. Yep. And sometimes it's so relaxing that you almost feel like you're going to fall asleep. But I think that is, it's like almost like a Control-Alt-Delete for your body.
Absolutely.
And I think that making sure that you're doing the things to keep your stress low as much as possible is really important. And I know we all need to practice, what we preach. And I know that we really try to do that as much as we possibly can. And you feel it tremendously if your stress levels start to creep up.
Yeah.
By practicing calmness helps you calm in general moving forward. Kind of like I always use the analogy of a professional athlete. Like they made it to the big games, they don't stop practicing, right? So we can practice 10-minute timeouts every day to then be able to make better decisions and be calm on your everyday routine as well.
Absolutely.
I also like the Insight Timer app, which is another one that we have a lot of our patients using. But bottom line is stress affects your cortisol level. And
that's it.
Cortisol is, it can be good, but it can also be bad.
Yeah, and it drives up your sugar, and that's never good, right? Cortisol and sugar for inflammation, which is what we tie everything back to, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's never good.
And then we also talked about environmental factors, which we can briefly talk about. But what people don't understand is, we mentioned heavy metals, but there's also mold and there's air pollution. There's dirty water. I mean, I'm a big fan of like filtered water. But then I also put my minerals back in the water so I can control my minerals in it. And all of those can cause cellular damage and increase your aging.
There's also light pollution and sound pollution and things that we don't think of as being pollution, but we're constantly being bombarded by everything. I know EMFs are controversial, but we're surrounded by them regardless of what we do.
I think one of the things we can do that's easy that I think most of us probably forget about is to try to detox our homes. And when I say that, what I mean is when you're selecting your cleaning products, pick products that are clean. It's easy to go to, Sprouts or Whole Foods, or a lot of these places now have, the products that are chemical free, and they don't have the things that are hormone disruptors. So when you're buying your laundry detergent, buy, the free and clear laundry detergent. Don't buy the scented with all the 95 different fragrances
and dyes.
Yeah. I mean,
if something's not a natural color, you probably shouldn't be using it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's true. So I think that's one easy kind of thing that we forget that we can do.
Absolutely. And you can get good air filters for your home and filter your water. Those are other things.
Our makeup, ladies, makeup is a big one. What we put on our lips, we're licking our lips 1,000,000 times a day. That's all going in. So there are things that are easy and basic that we can do to help kind of mitigate some of those environmental factors.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just something also is, switching out your pots and pans maybe to not have non-stick, or even if you get what's it called? Non-burn, like the fire protection that's on certain clothing. People don't realize, that's like asbestos. It's just, and the wrinkle-free clothing tends to have a lot of chemicals on it because otherwise they would wrinkle, right? Yeah. So, people don't realize that all the toxins you're exposed to in an everyday basis. So I agree. And another one is like candles. I think they recommend beeswax candles. Think about like the candles you buy with all this strong fragrance. Well, a lot of times it's not just wax in that candle.
Absolutely.
Even touching receipts.
With BPA.
Yeah.
So it's exactly, and this is where people say, "Oh my God, we're all gonna die." Yeah. But no, you can try to reduce these toxins, right? Yeah. Like all you can do is try your best, And
it's about feeling better, right?
Exactly.
It's about feeling better.
And then if you go touch all these things, then go to the ozone and get detoxed, right? You can cleanse your system, get them out of your system as best as you can, and make sure your body is functioning as well as it can.
That's it.
And so there's a few nutraceuticals and supplements. Do you guys want to go ahead and touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, obviously we could go on and on with nutraceuticals. NAD we touched on a little bit earlier in the conversation, and I think that's a big one, right? We can do that through IV, but we can also take, pill,
orally.
Oral
you can
form.
do NMR or NMN, which will convert to NAD.
Right, NMN, yeah, that's right. And that's, obviously a coenzyme in our body. For those of us that don't know what that is, it's a coenzyme in our body that kind of decreases as we age. And it decreases from stress and toxins and just overall, like our chronological age increasing. So when we replace that, that's very, very, very helpful.
They believe that it's linked with lengthening of the telomeres.
Absolutely.
And that is what we see our age on. And I think you're going to talk about that in certain biomarkers you can do.
Yeah, that's another big one. Resveratrol, which is very helpful with cardiovascular protection and keeping our blood pressure at bay. Curcumin, another big one for inflammation. So those are just to name a couple. I mean, there's so many different.
And we're going to have more podcasts about it because we dabble in peptides, which also help with this.
That could be an entire podcast, right? We could talk about that for hours.
Absolutely.
And jumping back to like the NAD with, like the telomeres stuff, I think it's a really kind of a cool image when you start talking about like the decrease in, the telomeres and stuff like that, is that think of it in terms of like a frayed shoelace, and so as you age, like the telomeres are starting to fray, and so it's cellular aging. Like you're aging, but what it can do, through that coenzyme is think of it like putting a piece of tape on it and capping it off, or lengthening it, to repair it. So from that kind of visual standpoint, I think that really helps to understand what's kind of going on.
Great. Well, guys, I think we are out of time for today. I know
it went fast.
It went way too fast,
and we covered a lot of stuff.
Yes, and I think there's still so much more we could have you back on and talk about. Yeah. So, why don't you go ahead and tell our audience a little bit about your clinic, how they can find you? Are you on social media?
Yeah, so we are Nouveau Health and Wellness. We're located in Palm Beach Gardens, and we do have, obviously, social media. I think it's Nouveau Health Wellness is our Instagram handle.
Can you spell Nouveau?
Yeah, it's N as in Nancy, O-U, V as in Victor, E-A-U. So it's Nouveau Health and Wellness, and like I said, we're in Palm Beach Gardens, and we have a vast amount of things, obviously, that we offer at the center. All, the functional medicine side, all the fun aesthetics. We have IV infusions, and there's so many different things we didn't even talk about, obviously, today. Float therapy and things of that nature, which are great for stress reduction and lowering that cortisol. So
infrared sauna,
infrared, salt. Yeah.
And they can see all of this on your website, correct?
They can.
And what's your website?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's nouveauhealthandwellness.com.
Okay.
Pretty just simple. And then for those of the listeners who aren't Instagram, that are maybe more Facebook, it's Nouveau, Nouveau, Palm Beach. That's our Facebook.
Excellent.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us.
We've loved having you. The information contained in this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended for the purposes of diagnosing, curing, treating, or preventing any disease. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Before using any products or services referenced on this podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, carefully read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information found or received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem or should you have any healthcare questions, please promptly call or see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Dr. Brian Marias, Deanna Weilbacher, and Hybrid Medical Solution, do not claim responsibility for any adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for any statements made by the guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referenced.
If you would like to submit any questions or if you have any topics you would be interested in hearing about on future episodes, please contact us through our website, www.hybridmedicalsolution.com. That is solution with no S at the end. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, all under Hybrid Medical Solution.